Tom Cruise made impossible demands. Clint's response shocked Hollywood. He walked away from $50 million. Subscribe for Untold Hollywood Power Stories. Like if respect beats money, what would you sacrifice for integrity? If you are ready, let me begin. The conference room at Paramount Studios was silent, except for the faint hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic on Melrose Avenue. It was the 15th of March, 1995, and the most powerful people in Hollywood were gathered around a mahogany table worth more than most people's homes, discussing what would become the Mission Impossible franchise. Ahead of the table sat Sherry Lansing, Paramount's chairman, flanked by two senior executives and a small army of lawyers and agents. Across from them, Clint Eastwood sat quietly in his chair, wearing a simple button-down shirt and dark jacket. At 65, he commanded respect through presence alone. No raised voices, no theatrical gestures, just the quiet authority that had made him one of the most successful actor-directors in cinema history. And then there was Tom Cruise. At 32, Cruise was at the absolute peak of his stardom. Top Gun, Rain Man, A Few Good Men, Jerry Maguire. He was the biggest box office draw on the planet, commanding $20 million per picture plus back-end participation. When Tom Cruise wanted something, studios listened. When he demanded something, they usually complied. The meeting had been called to discuss the direction of Mission Impossible. Based on the classic television series, Cruise would star and produce. Clint had been approached to direct, a pairing that promised to create one of the biggest films in Paramount's history. The budget was set at $80 million, enormous for 1995. Clint's fee as director would be $12 million, plus points on the back end that could potentially double that amount. For the first hour, the meeting had proceeded normally. Script discussions, casting possibilities, locations, release dates. Clint listened more than he spoke, occasionally asking practical questions about scheduling or budget concerns. This was how he worked, efficiently, professionally, without drama. Then Tom began outlining his vision for his character, Ethan Hunt. "I want complete creative control over the action sequences," Tom said, his voice carrying the confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. "My character needs to be the center of every major set piece. Every mission, every impossible task revolves around what Ethan can do." Clint nodded slightly. This was reasonable. The star often had input on how their character was portrayed. "I also want approval over all major casting decisions," Tom continued. "Anyone who shares scenes with Ethan needs to understand they're supporting my performance, not competing with it." The executives exchanged glances but said nothing. This was less reasonable but not unprecedented for a star of Tom's caliber. "And I want the film to showcase my physicality," Tom pressed on. "The stunts, the running sequences, the fight scenes, they all need to highlight what makes Ethan Hunt unique, what makes me unique as an action star." Clint remained silent, his face revealing nothing of what he was thinking. He'd directed action films before. He understood the star's desire to look heroic, but something in Tom's tone suggested this wasn't a collaborative discussion. It was a list of demands. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, with Tom outlining increasingly specific requirements for his character's portrayal. He wanted script approval. He wanted to review dailies every evening and have input on which takes were used. He wanted his personal trainer on set at all times, his nutritionist, his Scientology advisor. Clint listened to all of this without comment. When the meeting ended, hands were shaken, schedules were compared, and everyone left with the understanding that pre-production would begin in 6 weeks. But Clint was watching. He was always watching. The first red flag came during the first script meeting 2 weeks later. Tom arrived with his own writer, someone who had never worked on an action film but who understood, as Tom put it, "my method and my needs as a performer. We need to restructure the opening sequence," Tom announced, spreading revised pages across the conference table. Ethan needs a longer introduction. The audience needs to understand his capabilities before we get to the team dynamics. Clint reviewed the new pages. The original opening had been a tight, efficient introduction to the IMF team working together on a mission. Tom's version was essentially a solo showcase. Ethan Hunt performing an elaborate infiltration mission alone, demonstrating his skills in martial arts, technology, and psychological manipulation. "This changes the character," Clint said quietly. "The original Ethan Hunt was part of a team. Here he is a superhero." "Exactly," Tom replied, missing or ignoring the criticism in Clint's observation. "That is what audiences want to see. They want to see Tom Cruise doing impossible things." The second red flag came during casting discussions. Tom had promised approval over major roles, but he was exercising veto power over anyone he deemed too charismatic or physically impressive. "This actor for Phelps," Tom said, reviewing headshots. "He is too tall. He'll make me look small in 2 shots. He is 5'10", Clint pointed out. "Same as you, but he has a bigger frame, more presence. We need someone less overwhelming." 3 different actors were rejected for similar reasons. Too handsome, too physically imposing, too memorable. Tom wanted a supporting cast that would literally support him by diminishing their own presence. The third red flag was the most telling. During a production meeting, Tom's assistant delivered a list of on-set requirements that read like a writer for a rock concert. His trailer needed to be positioned exactly 100 yards from the main set, close enough to be convenient, far enough to maintain separation from the crew. Catering needed to provide his specific dietary requirements, prepared by his personal chef. No crew member was to make direct eye contact with him unless he initiated the interaction. But the deal breaker was buried on page 3 of the requirements list. Mr. Cruise's preparation time cannot be interrupted by production schedules. When Mr. Cruise is preparing for a scene, filming will wait until he indicates readiness. Clint read this twice. He'd worked with difficult actors before, but this was something else. This wasn't about craft or artistic integrity. This was about control. "How long does Tom typically need to prepare?" Clint asked the assistant. "It varies," she replied diplomatically. "Sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes several hours." "Several hours?" "Mr. Cruise's process is very thorough." Clint set down the requirements list and looked directly at Tom, who was sitting at the other end of the table reviewing storyboards. "Tom," Clint said, "can we talk about the preparation time issue?" Tom looked up with the smile that had made him famous. Bright, confident, completely at ease. "What about it?" "The crew call is 6 a.m. If you are not ready until noon, that is 75 people standing around for 6 hours. That is what they're paid for," Tom replied, his smile never wavering. "To be ready when I am ready. That is how films work, Clint. The star sets the pace. That is not how my films work." "Well," Tom said, still smiling, but with an edge creeping into his voice, "this isn't just your film. This is a Tom Cruise production. That means Tom Cruise standards." The room had gone quiet. Everyone could sense the tension, but no one was quite sure what was happening. Clint was known for his calm professionalism. Tom was known for getting his way. This felt like an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. "What exactly are Tom Cruise standards?" Clint asked, his voice remaining that same quiet rasp that had become famous in westerns. Tom leaned forward, his confidence absolute. "Excellence, perfection, whatever it takes to deliver the performance audiences deserve. If that means the crew waits, they wait. If that means we reshoot until I am satisfied, we reshoot. If that means other people adjust their processes to accommodate my process, that is what happens. And if the director disagrees, the director learns to work within the system that makes successful films." Clint nodded slowly, as if he was processing this information. The silence stretched for nearly a full minute while everyone in the room waited to see what would happen next. "Tom," Clint said finally, "I've been making films for 25 years. I've worked with some of the biggest stars in Hollywood. I've never had a film go over budget or over schedule. I've never had a crew revolt or walk off set. You know why? Tom's smile had faded slightly. He sensed this wasn't going where he expected. Because I treat filmmaking like a collaboration, not a dictatorship. Everyone, from the star to the grip, shows up ready to work. Everyone respects everyone else's time. Everyone serves the story, not their ego. I am not serving my ego, Tom replied, his voice rising slightly. I am serving excellence. I am serving the audience who pays money to see Tom Cruise films. No, Clint said simply, you are serving Tom Cruise. The room was absolutely silent now. This was unprecedented. Nobody talked to Tom Cruise like this. Nobody questioned his methods or his requirements. Studios accommodated him. Directors worked around him. Cruise waited for him. Tom's smile was completely gone now. I think there is a misunderstanding here about how star vehicles work, Clint. The star isn't just another employee. The star is the reason people buy tickets. The story is the reason people buy tickets, Clint corrected. The character is the reason people care. You are not bigger than the film, Tom. Nobody is. Tom stood up, his famous intensity now focused on Clint with laser precision. I think you are misunderstanding the economics here. Paramount isn't paying me $20 million to be collaborative. They're paying me to be Tom Cruise. That means doing things my way, according to my standards, with my requirements met. And if those requirements interfere with making a good film, they don't. They enhance it. Everything I do is designed to make the film better. Clint remained seated, looking up at Tom with the same calm expression he'd maintained throughout the entire conversation. Everything you do is designed to make Tom Cruise look better. There is a difference. Tom's eyes narrowed. This was not how these conversations typically went. Usually, when Tom Cruise stated his requirements, people found ways to accommodate them. They didn't challenge the fundamental premise that Tom Cruise's needs came first. I think you need to decide whether you want to direct a Tom Cruise film or not, Tom said, his voice carrying an unmistakable threat. Because if you want to direct a Tom Cruise film, you do it on Tom Cruise terms. The threat hung in the air for a long moment. Everyone in the room understood what was being said. Submit to Tom's demands or lose the project. Accept his requirements, or walk away from millions of dollars. And one of the biggest films of the decade. Clint stood up slowly, his full height making Tom look smaller, despite his platform shoes. He reached for the folder containing his contract and the script revisions. You are right, Tom, Clint said quietly. I do need to decide. He walked to the head of the table where Sherry Lansing sat. Looking mortified by the entire exchange, he placed the folder in front of her. I've decided, Clint said. I don't want to direct a Tom Cruise film. The room erupted. Not loudly. These were professionals, but with the urgent whispers and shuffling papers that indicated complete surprise. This didn't happen. Directors didn't walk away from Tom Cruise projects. Nobody walked away from $50 million potential earnings. Tom stared at Clint with complete disbelief. You are walking away from Mission Impossible, from the biggest franchise launch in Paramount's history. I am walking away from working with someone who thinks his process is more important than 75 other people's time, Clint replied. Someone who wants to be accommodated rather than collaborate. This is insane, Tom said, his voice rising. Do you know how many directors would kill for this opportunity? Then you should hire one of them. Clint turned to Sherry Lansing. Thank you for considering me. This just isn't the right fit. He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at Tom. Tom, he said, you are a talented actor. You work hard. You are dedicated to your craft. But filmmaking is bigger than any one person's ego, even yours. Tom was speechless. He stood there, mouth slightly open, watching the most respected director in Hollywood walk away from him. You'll regret this, Tom called after him. When this film makes $400 million worldwide, you'll regret walking away. Clint stopped at the door but didn't turn around. Maybe, but I'll still respect myself in the morning. Then he left, The story hit Hollywood before Clint's car left the Paramount lot. By evening, it was in Variety. By the next morning, it was international news. Clint Eastwood had walked away from Mission Impossible because Tom Cruise's demands were unreasonable. Tom's representatives immediately went into damage control mode, claiming creative differences and scheduling conflicts. But too many people had been in that conference room. The real story came out. The impact on both men's careers was immediate but opposite. Tom went on to make Mission Impossible with Brian De Palma, who accommodated every one of his demands. The film was a massive success, launching one of the most profitable franchises in film history. But something else happened. The story of Clint walking away became legendary in Hollywood. It became a symbol of artistic integrity, of choosing principles over profit. Young directors referenced it when standing up to difficult stars. Veteran actors cited it when discussing professionalism. Clint, meanwhile, went on to direct Absolute Power and later Mystic River, $1 Million Baby and Gran Torino, films that won Academy Awards and cemented his legacy as one of cinema's greatest directors. Years later, in an interview about directing, Clint was asked about the Mission Impossible incident. His response was characteristically brief. Some collaborations work, some don't. I prefer working with people who understand that everyone's contribution matters. But those who were in that Paramount conference room remember it differently. They remember the moment when the most powerful actor in Hollywood met someone who couldn't be intimidated, couldn't be bought, and wouldn't compromise his principles for any amount of money. They remember the quiet dignity of a man who walked away from $50 million because he knew what he was worth and what he wouldn't sacrifice to get it. Is integrity worth more than money? Clint Eastwood answered that question on the 15th of March, 1995, and his answer changed Hollywood forever.